This is Fortress News with Jake Zabel.
Hello and welcome to Fortress News. I am your host, Jake Zabel. For those of you who are new to Fortress News is a church news podcast produced by the Order of Knight George. If you'd like to check out any of the other content produced by the Order of Knight George, you can search for us on either iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Or better yet, you can head over to our website, www.knightgeorge.info. Now, this edition of Fortress News is going to be a little bit different. For those of you watching us on YouTube, Fortress News is normally restricted to an audio podcast, and you can find those on either SoundCloud or iTunes. If you're interested in listening to any of the other episodes of Fortress News, I'll leave a link to them in the description below. For those of you listening to us on SoundCloud, I'll also be doing a visual edition of this episode. This is because I have some pictures and videos that I'd like to include in this news story. If you'd like to see them, you'll have to go over and watch the video edition on YouTube. I'll leave a link to that in the episode description. Now, with all that out of the way, let us get on with our news story regarding the LCA's Day of Action scandal. For those of you who are unaware, the LCA stands for the Lutheran Church of Australia. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a former member of the LCA. Now I am currently an independent Lutheran. I withdrew from the LCA because I could not, in good conscience, subscribe to the teachings and practices of the LCA. However, I still have many friends and family within the LCA, and so I still maintain close ties to the Synod, and I also keep a close observation on the activities of the LCA. This leads us to our story, as there is a particular category of activity in the LCA that has me concerned for the members of the LCA, prompting me to bring this story into the light. Now, for those who are unaware of the LCA's situation, the Synod has been debating the topic of women's ordination for decades now. According to the foundational document of the LCA, the Theses of Agreement, Article 6, Paragraph 11, the LCA teaches that women are not permitted to serve in the office of the ministry. However, there are many in the LCA who oppose this teaching and would like to see it change. Thus, the LCA has had 4 votes in recent history to try and change this teaching. However, on all 4 occasions, the LCA has failed to reach the 2/3 majority mandated by the Constitution to necessitate a change in doctrine. The last vote was held in October 2018 at the LCA's Synodical Convention, which saw an increase in the number of people opposed to the ordination of women. It is the reaction to this last vote from those who support the ordination of women that has prompted this news story. Following the outcome of last year's vote, there has been a negative reaction from those who are in favour of the ordination of women, including open acts of rebellion against the Synod. Firstly, there are congregations holding lament and hope services aimed at grieving the failure to change the position of the LCA to allow for the ordination of women. In addition, there have been numerous congregations that have actively sought to protest the LCA's teaching on the ordination of women by having women lead services and preach sermons.
I'd like us to think together for a while about the story that Gladys told us. And just one little piece from there. Jesus' mother treasured all these things in her heart.
And I'll say right now that I went on a bit of a journey figuring out what I was going to say tonight, and I'm sure that lots of people have experienced the same thing. The first time I read this passage, I read verse 29 and 30, and not going to lie, I took it as Jesus' permission for me to talk about plants.
Have you ever tried to see in the dark? Maybe outside at night with no torch or no light from your smartphone? So you can pick up broad outlines, but you can't really make out much detail.
You who were here last time I spoke, it did not really start well or end well. So thankfully my two little sidekicks are at home, which should make this evening a little more manageable. So tonight I'd like to talk to you about a new friend that I've made.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word and thank you for how it's formed in Heather in the message this morning. We ask that you would continue to bless her by your Holy Spirit so that she may say what you've given her to say, and we may hear what you've given us to hear. We pray this in Jesus' name.
So you have to excuse me, I've had the privilege of being in my dad's shed twice this week, so I've done a bit of rummaging through there to kind of demonstrate what I'm going to talk about this morning.
Now, according to the teachings and practices of the LCA, as specified in the document, should women serve as lay readers in public worship, women are permitted in the LCA to lead lay reading services. However, this is only to be done in accordance with the following conditions. 1. A lay reading service is only to be held when a pastor is not present or available to hold a regular worship service. 2. Any lay reader, whether they be male or female, is only to read out a sermon prepared by the pastor. And 3. Only called and ordained members of the office of the ministry are permitted to consecrate the elements for Holy Communion. According to numerous statements written by the LCA, lay people, both male and female, are permitted to distribute the Lord's Supper, but only called and ordained pastors are allowed to consecrate the elements. However, despite the public teachings and practices of the LCA, numerous congregations and their pastors have taken it upon themselves to defy the synod and to openly rebel against these teachings. These congregations have allowed laywomen to preach sermons that they have prepared themselves and to lead worship, while the pastor, who is the one called to serve this congregation, sits in the pew and is instead served by these women. And, according to reports, on some cases, these women have even been permitted to consecrate the elements for Holy Communion. This leads us to the LCA Day of Action scandal that took place in late December of 2018. On the 30th of December 2018, a collection of congregations and their pastors decided to protest the LCA's teaching on the ordination of women by calling for a day of action. On this day, a number of LCA congregations had women lead them in worship. These women led the congregation in worship, led the prayers, read the lessons, and preached their own sermons. All of this was done while their pastors sat in the pew in support of this rebellious act. According to reports, the pastors sat in the pews for the whole service, only getting up to consecrate the elements for Holy Communion. And according to reports, in at least one or more of these congregations, the laywomen consecrated the elements for Holy Communion. In addition to this, a few congregations repeated these actions the following week on January 6, 2019. Now, according to my sources, about 20 plus congregations and their pastors participated in this day of action. My sources have compiled a list of those pastors and congregations who are believed to have been involved. However, as we do not have a solid confirmation that all of these congregations did in fact participate in this day of action, I will refrain from reading out the entire list. However, we do have photographic evidence taken from Facebook concerning several of these congregations, confirming their involvement in this day. These photos should currently be appearing on your screen. We also have some video and audio from these congregations, containing a recording of these women preaching on the day. The list of congregations whose involvement in this day of action we can confirm are as follows: St. Stephen's Lutheran Church, Adelaide, South Australia; St. Andrew's Lutheran Church, Brisbane, Queensland. Our Saviour Lutheran Church in Indooroopilly, Queensland, which is connected to the Redeemer Lutheran Church in Rochdale, Queensland. St. Paul's Lutheran Church, Box Hill, Victoria. The Bethany Lutheran Church in the Barossa Valley, South Australia. The Victor Harbour Lutheran Church in South Australia. Living Faith Lutheran Church at Marumba Downs, Queensland, and the Mawson Lakes Community Church, South Australia, which, believe it or not, is actually a member congregation of the LCA. In these pictures, you can see women actively leading the congregation in worship. Now I'd like to draw your attention to one particular photo taken at St. Stephen's Lutheran Church, Adelaide, at a sorry service held on October 14th, 2018, the week straight after the LCA's Synodical Convention. As you can see, in this picture, 2 lay women are distributing the Lord's Supper, and according to reports, the one in the alb actually consecrated the elements for the Lord's Supper. The man you see in this picture is none other than Reverend Dr. Peter Lockwood, a retired pastor of the LCA and a retired lecturer from the Australian Lutheran College. Here, he is actively defying the teachings of the LCA by publicly supporting this rebellious sorry service by receiving Holy Communion that is being consecrated and distributed by a laywoman. At the bottom of this picture, you'll also notice that the preacher for this sorry service was a woman. So on the week following the LCA's vote on the ordination of women, which did not get the necessary 2/3 needed to change the teaching and practice of the LCA, you have a congregation allowing women to lead the worship, to preach and to teach and to consecrate and distribute the Lord's Supper, while pastors of the LCA support this behaviour by allowing themselves to be served by these lay women. These congregations are not only publicly and proudly protesting the decision of the LCA's 2018 Synodical Convention, but they are going against the public teachings and practices of the LCA by allowing lay women to lead lay reading services while pastors are present and available to lead a regular worship service, by allowing laity to preach sermons that they have prepared themselves and not by a pastor, and by allowing laity to consecrate the elements for the Lord's Supper. This is nothing more than open defiance of the teachings and practices of the LCA. This kind of rebellious behaviour should not be tolerated in the LCA. The bishops and those in positions of leadership need to step in and do their job and exercise some church discipline. And this brings me to the LCA's rite of ordination. In the LCA's rite of ordination, pastors take a vow to uphold the public teaching and practice of the LCA and to accept the pastoral and doctrinal oversight of the bishop. The current official public teaching of the LCA is that women are not permitted to serve in the office of the ministry. However, these pastors and these congregations in the LCA have violated this vow by upholding and promoting teachings contrary to the public teaching and practice of the LCA. In addition to this day of action and sorry service and lament service, there are pastors and congregations in the LCA who publicly advocate for the ordination of women in opposition to the public teaching and practice of the LCA. Just check out the church website of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church, Adelaide, which has a whole page dedicated to the promotion of women's ordination. And so this is my message to all those in the LCA who have participated in this kind of rebellious and defiant behaviour. The public teaching and practice of the LCA is that only men can be ordained to the office of the ministry. This is the LCA's official position. As pastors and members of the LCA, you are called to hold to, uphold, and promote the position of the LCA. You are not called to publicly teach and preach counter to the position of the Synod. You are not called to rebel against the decision of the Synod, and you are not called to change the position of the Synod to fit your own personal desires. If you cannot accept the position of the LCA, if you cannot accept the decision of the Synod, then the proper reaction is for you to leave the Synod, not to try and force a change through rebellious acts and through endless voting. Now, I speak from personal experience. I was once a member of the LCA, studying for the office of the ministry. But there came a point in my studies when I found that I did not agree with the teachings of the LCA, and I could not, in good conscience, take an ordination vow that said I upheld the public teachings and practices of the LCA. Thus, I left the Synod and sought out a new Synod whose teachings and practices I could agree with. And so, I'm reaching out to all those in the LCA who do not agree with the LCA's teaching on the ordination of women. Do as I did. Rather than trying to change the entire LCA to match your own beliefs, withdraw from the LCA and seek out a church that matches your beliefs. To my knowledge, there are at least 3 Lutheran groups in Australia who permit the ordination of women and would be more than welcoming to new members. There is the Living Water Fellowship Church in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, which is connected with the Lutheran churches in Mission for Christ. There is Living Waters Community Church in Mildura, Victoria, and there is the Living Grace Church in Toowoomba, Queensland. There are also the non-English speaking Lutheran churches that are not officially members of the LCA. If you're interested, you could join any of them. Alternatively, you could just start a new synod. I believe the Lutheran World Federation would love nothing more than to plant a new pro-women's ordination synod in Australia. My point is this: if you cannot accept the LCA's position that women cannot be ordained into the office of the ministry, then you should leave the synod rather than trying to change the position of the whole synod to match your own personal beliefs. This rebellious behaviour and open defiance of the teachings and practices of the LCA is causing damage, not only to the LCA, but to the church's mission to spread the gospel message. This behaviour is not loving. It does not build up the church. Instead, this behaviour tears down the church and creates more division and hurt amongst its members. So either accept the teaching and practice of your synod or go elsewhere. For those who are interested, I wrote an open letter to the LCA regarding this very topic. If you'd like to read it, you can find it over at the Order of Knight George website. Simply go to www.knightgeorge.info, click on the Articles tab, and then click on the Jake Zabel tab. You'll find the letter at the bottom of the page. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you have found it both helpful and informative.